Good evening, and welcome to Monday Night Politics, sponsored by the Dallas Examiner. The Dallas Examiner has sponsored Monday Night Politics for, over 12 years consecutively. The Dallas Examiner does not endorse candidates. What we want to do is inform our community about the candidates, their platforms, and so that when you go to vote, you are informed voters. We have a lot of sponsors, and you probably had a chance to see them on the PowerPoint. And we have two new sponsors with us this year. Our Vote is Our Voice group, and also the DFW Metro NAACP. Those are new sponsors. And I'm so delighted tonight to have as our moderator Charles O'Neill. Charles O'Neill was the first editor of the Dallas Examiner. He and my father started the Dallas Examiner. Charles is currently president of the Texas Association of Black Chambers of Commerce. Charles.
All right. Thank you, Molly. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. And it is indeed my pleasure to be with you this evening in this iteration of Monday Night Politics. As Ms. Belt noted, for years now, the Dallas Examiner has done its role, done its job. Oh, come on, ma'am. And done its job in ensuring that our community is informed, particularly in this case around issues of importance in the political arena. So without further ado, we want to go ahead tonight for purposes of ease of purposes, on less pressure on me. We're going to go by alphabetical order. And so tonight we're very fortunate to have as candidates for U.S. Representative for District 30, we have Representative Jasmine Crockett. Raise your hand real quick. Mr. Arthur Dixon, Jane Hope Hamilton, Vancille Hill, Keisha Langford, Jessica Mason, and Abel Mulugeta. So thank you so much. So tonight, the ground rules are very simple. We're going to give you 2 minutes for opening statements. You'll have 1 minute when we get to the questions part, 1 minute to respond to questions. You'll see that the countdown will begin when you begin your answer. And then we'll have closing statements for 2 minutes each as well. Okay? So without further ado, again, in alphabetical order, first opening statement from Jasmine Crockett.
Thank you so much. Do you want me to?
However makes most comfortable for you.
Okay. Am I allowed to take this off?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Well, this is definitely different. I'm used to this room being full, but this is an indication of the times that we're living in. For those of you that don't know who I am State Representative Jasmine Crockett. And I have had the pleasure, or sometimes not so pleasurable, experience of serving in the Texas House this last session, this very crazy session that we've had, where our voting rights were under attack, where women's reproductive rights were under attack, where our very democracy overall, when it comes to redistricting, was under attack, when trans children were under attack, where there was nothing but attacks coming from one side of the aisle. Sadly enough, we quickly learned that our only relief was going to be on the federal level. And even when those in power within my party decided that it would be most expedient for us to sit there and take the abuse, that wasn't my stance. I always stood up and I always fought for my district, House District 100. We knew that we had to go to DC. We went to DC. And while we were in DC, it became apparent that the only way that we are going to get relief in the state of Texas, especially in a redistricting year where they were going to cheat to win because that's the only thing that they know how to do, I knew that I was going to have to step up to the plate, that there was going to need to be someone who had actual legislative experience, who understood what it took to actually get a bill passed, what it took to introduce a bill, and the types of bills that needed to be introduced that would be most beneficial to our district. My House district sits within Congressional District 30. I've had an opportunity to serve, and I'm just trying to take that service to the next level in a time when we know that democracy has to be number one, because if we don't get that together, we don't get any other rights that we deserve, because we've got to get the right people into office. And when they're trying to cheat and overturn elections, we just can't do that. I'm Jasmine Crockett, your candidate for Congressional District 30.
Thank you so much. Mr. Arthur Dixon. Yes, sir.
It is a particular honor for me to be here tonight because, let's be honest, I shouldn't even be on this stage. My name is Arthur Dixon. I'm 25 years old, and I'm running to be one of the youngest people ever elected to Congress and the first person from Generation Z. I'm running here in Dallas to replace a retiring 30-year incumbent who has been in office for longer than I've been alive. You know, one of the main questions people ask me is, hey, you're so young, why are you running for Congress? And for me, it's simple. I'm running to make a real impact in people's lives. I'm running because I've been homeless. I'm running because I was adopted at 2 years old and raised by a single mom who often worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs just to provide for us. I'm running because my biological father passed away in his 40s from a heart attack because he couldn't afford proper health care. Because like many people in our district, there have been nights where I went to bed without eating because I had to decide between paying my bills and feeding my belly. I'm running because 22% of our district lives below the poverty line, because 40% of people make below a livable wage, because 50% of teachers say they work a second or a third job just to make ends meet. One of the core values of our campaign is empowering transformative thinking. So that means that we believe that in order to see bold progressive change that actually makes an impact in people's lives, we have to take bold progressive actions. That's why we're running on a platform of an unapologetically progressive platform focused primarily on a universal basic income, where every American gets a $1,000 stimulus from the government, just like how we did during the pandemic, just like Alaska has done for the past 40 years. We have the ability to completely eliminate poverty in our country and in our district. It just takes political courage. A $15 minimum wage, affordable health care, affordable college, a Green New Deal, and the legalization of marijuana. Because we're tired of watching black and brown kids get thrown into prison while rich business owners profit billions of dollars off the cannabis industry. I'm running for office because Texas is ranked 47th in the nation in access to health care, 33rd in the nation in access to infrastructure, 32nd in the nation in higher education. The only thing Texas leads the nation in is the number of incarcerated citizens, most of which are in jail for petty marijuana charges. I'm running for office because I believe that bold progressive change that actually makes an impact in people's lives requires bold progressive actions on all of our parts. So thank you.
Thank you. Jane Hope Hamilton.
Hello. Thank you to the host of Monday Night Politics for hosting us and giving us this opportunity. My name is Jane Hope Hamilton. I'm a wife, a mom, and a battle-tested leader. I'm running for Congress because I know what it means to struggle, and I know what it means to be marginalized. It is crucial that we have elected leaders who will not only fight for us, but who will deliver the results that we need. And that is exactly what I have been doing for over 20 years, listening to the concerns of North Texas communities and delivering for our families. I'm sorry, he's saying he can't hear me. Is this not working? Oh, sorry, I thought you were pointing. So sorry about that. I am running because I want to make a change. Many of you do not know my name, but you do know my work. I have managed the Dallas County Coordinated Campaign. I have served as statewide director for President Joe Biden. I have sued the governor of Texas to protect our voting rights, not twice, not once, but twice, and I have won. I am running because I have what it takes to deliver the results for our family. I have also worked on Capitol Hill, serving as chief of staff to a member of Congress. I have worked on the U.S. House Rules Committee. I have worked on the U.S. House Democratic Caucus, and I am prepared to serve on day one. If you elect me to Congress, I will deliver on the issues that matter most to us. I will deliver on affordable housing, affordable health care, national voting rights, and strong public schools. I am here asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Von Seal Hill.
I am Von Seal Jones Hill. I am a lifelong Democrat, a lawyer, and a minister, and a former judge. I am running for this office to make a difference. I have been given gifts and graces beyond anything that I deserve. And I believe that those gifts and graces have been given to me in order to serve the community, and I serve through political office. You know me. I'm a known quantity in this community. I served, as I indicated, as a municipal judge. I was on the Dallas bench for 17 years. I served on the Dallas City Council for 8 years. I am a seasoned and experienced lawmaker and policymaker with a verifiable track record of achievement. I brought the resources home from Austin and Washington. Just take a look at the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge, the Margaret McDermott Bridge, the Dallas streetcars in Oak Cliff. I brought those things home. I am going to Washington for the same reason, to bring home the resources. I have also served in this community as a volunteer on the African American Museum Board with the Boy Scouts and with the State Fair of Texas. I am committed to service. That's what I'm about. I'm Von Seal Jones Hill, and I am asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Keisha Langford.
Good evening. I am Dr. Keisha Williams Langford, a Dallas native here in the wonderful District 30. I want to thank those for organizing and all the organizations that are sponsoring. This is a huge thing for us to be able to communicate with each other. Thank our moderator, and also want to congratulate all of these beautiful candidates on this stage, because it is a labor of love to represent your community. I am here as a Dallas native. I was born in this district, 5 generations, from my grandmother to my grandchildren. District 30 has always been home to me. I taught here after leaving school at East Texas State University. I taught at Mountain View and at Townview in order to help build better children, preparing them for their future. With 21 years of education, I took that to the Cedar Hill Independent School District, where I reside and have resided for 20 years. And I am there now as a school board trustee. As a trustee, I get to advocate for our children and the stakeholders in our communities. And let's be honest, if you're happy with the state of affairs in District 30, then you would continue to go with what has been stated or recommended in District 30. But right now, District 30 does not just need a politician. They need someone that cares. We need someone that's going to bring those resources to the community and make sure with fidelity it gets to the people that are needing those resources. Right now, I'm told that millions have been brought to our district, and we are not able to really see the results of that. So with me, I would like to leave the legacy for our next generations to soar. Soar means support, opportunities, accountability, and results. It's no need for us to pass the Voting Rights Act if we can't have quality representation. Thank you. I'm Dr. Keisha Williams Langford, the candidate you can trust.
Thank you so much. Ms. Jessica Dixon. Mason, I'm going too fast. I'm reading myself. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank you all for having me here today. My name is Jessica Mason. I am a Navy veteran. I am an affordable housing organizer, but most importantly, I am a daughter of Dallas. I was born and raised right here, actually a couple streets over from where we are now in Hamilton Village. I was raised in a community that was economically devastated by the crack epidemic and the movement of industrial jobs overseas. My mom worked full-time for a very wealthy businessman, but she found it hard to put food on the tables for me and my siblings. Growing up in Dallas, it was not easy, but I did everything that I could to change my future and the future of others. So I joined the military, and I served for 5 years as a mental health professional. And there, I counseled service members ailing with the mental tolls of war. When I returned home, I found that my community was exactly the same way it was when I left, if not worse. So what I did was I went into the same communities that I grew up in, and I decided to serve them. What I do every day is I work with working families, men, women, and children who work full-time, 40 hours a week, but still cannot afford to put food on their tables and a roof over their heads. I help them get rent assistance. I help them find food banks, and this is something that really needs to be focused on with the next candidate for Texas 30. I am that candidate because I have those lived experiences, and I understand what it's like to go through these issues. What we need is affordable health care. We need Medicare for all. What we need is affordable housing. We have 19 available housing units for every 100 people in need. We need to bring those funds back from Washington. And the only person that's going to really do that and be dedicated to that is a person that knows what it's like to go through those struggles, and I am that candidate. Again, my name is Jessica Mason. I am a Navy veteran. I am a member of your community, and I hope to have your
room at the time. Many individuals in District 30 can relate to that story. I also want to increase economic development and opportunities in the southern sector. I think that is the role of government, to work on behalf and for the people. My name is Abel Mulugeta, and I'm running for District 30. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. So we're going to enter into what I guess you feel like is going to be a lightning round, because you only have 1 minute to answer these questions, right? And so we're going to start off, you each have enumerated a number of issues that face our communities and that you will address as a candidate. But there's something that stands in the way of successful a life as an elected official: civic engagement. And how will you, as your candidacy, and subsequently, should you be elected, how will you make sure that the energy you put in will drive civic engagement? We just have too many people that don't understand the vital role that our elected officials play. And we hope that your candidacy will fire up that. So one real quick one minute answer on how you will drive civic engagement through your candidacy, and should you be elected. We'll start with Mr. Dixon. He'll be followed by Ms. Hamilton. Excuse me.
Yes, so I would start by, I'll stand up. Yeah, I'll start by saying, let's be honest. People feel like the system doesn't work for them. They feel like for the past 20, 30, 40 years, have seen the same old, that nothing has changed, that nothing is working. That's why our candidacy, our campaign is fighting for bold, progressive policies like a universal basic income, a policy that will actually help people, a policy that will lift 22% of our district out of poverty, over 200,000 people. The question was, how do we make more people civically engaged? The average age in our district is 33 years old. 33 years old. Like I mentioned earlier, our former Congresswoman was in office for 30 years, which is longer than I've been alive. So in my opinion, just by having a young, bold, progressive candidate who is willing to fight for bold, progressive policies that actually make a difference, not the same old rhetoric, not the same old establishment policies. If no one else is talking about a $15 minimum wage, we're going to talk about it. If no one else is talking about a universal basic income, we're going to talk about it. If no one else is talking about the legalization of marijuana, so hundreds and thousands of black and brown kids stop getting thrown into prison while rich white business owners profit billions of dollars, then we're going to talk about it, because it is up to us. The future is ours, and I think my generation sees that specifically, and I think our district as a whole sees that.
Thank you so much. Ms. Hamilton, followed by Ms. Hill.
Thank you. Civic engagement is of utmost importance in our community. And this is something that I have been working on for the duration of, frankly, my professional and personal life work. I have a 501c3, the Barbara Jordan Institute, and one of the things that we do is we educate our community on the importance of voting. Voting is a huge need in our community. The campaign, when we elected the first African American district attorney, Craig Watkins right here in Dallas County was about civic engagement. We talked about the issues that mattered in our community, like criminal justice reform. As someone who is a victim of police brutality and having been falsely charged with a felony, I understand how important voting is. And my main focus in my career has really been talking to the community and really making sure that we are mobilizing our community towards change.
Very good. Thank you so much, Ms. Hill, followed by Ms. Langford.
I will drive civic engagement during this campaign and after elected, just as I did while I was the 8 years on the council, by being with and among the people. I held town halls. I went to their neighborhood association meetings. I met them where they were and talked about the issues that were important to them. People become involved when they have ownership of the issues. People are concerned about COVID. People are concerned about wages. People are concerned about their children's education, about their health. Those things are where people get their minds around being involved in what is going on. That is what I talk to the community about. I'm with them and for them. They know it. They trust me. They have seen me in action. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Langford, followed by Ms. Mason.
Okay, I just want to say for a moment that I've had an opportunity to start this process at age 14. My very first campaign I've ever worked was with the Honorable Eddie Bernice Johnson and Senator Royce West, 14 years old. And as a result, I've paid that forward. So I've allowed my students to help elect Craig Watkins and helping them become engaged, because knowing the district attorney and having an opportunity to select them will play a huge part in their lives when it comes to rights, when it comes to justice. And then also help Ms. Vasile Hill with her City Hall campaign, my students did, because it is important for them to know how valuable and important they are. And through this pandemic, my husband and I have a nonprofit called the Avenue Proactive Resource Center. Started it in '97, coming back home committed to making a difference. This year, because of the pandemic, children didn't feel as powerful as they, or empowered as they should have. So what we did for the summer is we created an institute called Langford Leadership Project, and that gave them the opportunity to give back in community service.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Mason.
Most importance to District 30. We have 400,000 registered voters in this district, and less than 25% of them are showing up to the polls. Like I said earlier, I work with working families in public housing communities, and when I talk to them about why aren't you going out to vote, they say, because no one ever knocks on my door. I think it is very important for us as candidates not to just go out and talk to people who are already involved in politics, but go into those underserved neighborhoods that are usually forgotten. We need to be talking to younger people, people in my generation, and getting them gassed up to go to the polls. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that we are pushing policies that matter to them. And that means forgiving student debt, allowing them to have economic freedom. For a lot of people that I talk to every single day, again, it's putting food on the table. They want our economy to look good for them and not just for the stock market. So we have to be pushing policies that mean something to the people in our communities. If we're not doing that, then we will not have civic engagement.
All right, thank you. Mr. Miller, get up. Followed by Representative Crockett.
Yeah, so I also agree that civic engagement is very important, but it's hard to be engaged in the community and in the voting process if your house isn't in order, right? I think it's a privilege to be able to to be worried about civic engagement, while others have, they have other issues to worry about, like paying their rent or paying their utilities, paying their gas. Voting and getting involved in the community is something that we all should be doing, but too many families have other issues that they're dealing with that doesn't afford them the opportunity to get involved in their community. So that's just step number one, is making sure individuals have that infrastructure of opportunity so that they can then get involved in the community. But secondly, it does take an approach from the local and the state and the national level. We need all elected officials to engage with the community, not just a member of Congress. We're just one seat. We're going to have to engage as a collective. So
Very good. And Representative McCray.
So I was back there shaking my head. I don't know that this is an area that many of us actually disagree. You know, we are one person. I told people when I ran for this seat that I would be one of 150 to represent a total of 30 million people in the state of Texas. But let me tell you this part that most people don't know. I was outspent 5-1. My opponent at that point in time had $500,000. We raised $100,000 for that race. But the difference was we went to the people and we talked to them. And so I agree with so much of what's been said. But let me be clear. As an elected official currently sitting as a legislator, let me tell you the things that we do. In fact, you have an opportunity to tune in tomorrow because we have a monthly town hall that we have had every single month, no matter what. Even when I was on the House floor, I made sure I would tune in. So we have that every second Tuesday of the month. We also make sure that we do things in the community. It takes a lot to get legislation passed, but we have a free mammogram clinic that's coming up because we understand that until the legislation gets passed, we still got to work and help out those in our community. We also make sure that we're going to our children and making sure that they're interacting with law enforcement before things go really bad.
Thank you so much. That wasn't so bad, right? Quick minute. Here's another one for you. Many of the issues also that you've described, I think, and this is the closest I'll get to having a commercial for the work that I do, I believe have their root in economic disparity. How will you, in your candidacy and should you be elected, change the economic landscape in our community? And on this round, we'll start with Ms. Hamilton. Okay.
That is a wonderful question. First of all, we have an opportunity right now for our communities that we have not seen in a very long time. This is easily probably the largest federal investment that we will see in our lifetimes. This infrastructure deal that has passed, along with the Build Back Better that we are fighting with Joe Manchin to try to pass, is very important. One of the things that we know when we talk about economic opportunity is that in this infrastructure package that we have, and right now what is available to us is funds that are provided by the SBA. They create what is called community development financial institutions. Those institutions have funds that can be directly spent in our communities, but it's going to take leaders to make sure that when that money comes to our state, that people in Congressional District 30 are actually receiving those funds. You see, the thing about the federal government is that we are appropriators, but we have got to start getting in the business of being more of implementers, going to community stakeholders, working across the aisle and making sure that the money that comes to our state from the federal government is spent in our communities because we so desperately need it, and we need it now. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Judge Hill.
Economic parity is paramount. It comes from better jobs, better wages, equitable contracting. That means that everybody gets a fair shot. It means that we stop talking about $15 an hour, do it, and then get on to talking about something more than that. We did that kind of thing at the City of Dallas. We made sure that folk had a livable wage. That's what has to happen for economic parity. It also impacts taxes. Lower and middle class people pay more taxes than rich folk, and that is just not right, and it doesn't help with economic parity. Taxes have got to be more equalized, and people have got to be put to work.
Thank you so much. Dr. Langford.
Thank you. Thank you again for that question. Economics is the root to a lot of the challenges that we're experiencing. As stated, it's absolutely correct. We have to be the connector. And I am willing to avail myself to make sure that that money gets to the proper resources and is spent with fidelity. As a counselor and director of Langford Avenue, we deal with a lot of people that are without, homeless children, homeless families, people that are not able to get employment. But I'm going to tell you something. Right now, there's a job available that pays $18 an hour. You can go to Texas Workforce Commission and get free training that of the dollars that are sent, but it's a secret. No one knows about it. And so you can go, even with a background, and get supportive training so that you can make $40 an hour with a trade as a welder or a truck driver. People don't know this information, and that is my job. That is my job, to make sure we connect those resources to the people that need it. And we can do that with success stations starting at the rec centers and the libraries that already exist. It's not really difficult. You just have to have the heart to care. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mason.
Economic development in Texas 30, it hinges on a lot of different issues, but one of the biggest issues that we're seeing here are lack of jobs. And it's not just a lack of jobs, it's a lack of good paying jobs. Anyone who knows about my campaign knows that I am a very big advocate of unions, because unions provide good paying jobs that give people benefits that they need. Right now we have a lot of people being employed by Amazon, working at Church's Chicken, McDonald's, with wages that are not high enough to keep a roof over their head. So what we need are good paying union jobs that are gonna pay you $25 an hour and up, jobs that are gonna make sure that you have health care, jobs that are gonna make sure that you can build wealth for your family. Another thing is procurement. One of my colleagues was talking about the infrastructure bill and a lot of the money that's coming to Texas, but we need to make sure that the people who are getting those contracts are Black-owned businesses and Hispanic-owned businesses, because that's how we keep and build wealth within our community.
Mr. Mugulera.
I'm sorry.
Mugulera.
All right, thanks. So yeah, I think economic development is very important. Jobs, like I mentioned earlier, without an ability to pay your utilities and pay for your rent, you're not really able to do the other things in life that allow you to be engaged in your community. We see the disparities in southern Dallas County today. If you look at the northern part of our district or the northern part of the county, you see that it is thriving, and you see an influx of companies that are transitioning and moving their headquarters up north. I think we need the same sort of movement in the southern sector, some sort of growth that we've heard about for decades. I will serve as a chief marketing officer for Congressional District 30, serve as its biggest cheerleader, trying to bring companies.
Another thing that I did when I decided that I was going to run for this office was I made sure I reached out to elected officials on the city level, because a lot of those funds from the infrastructure bill that has been passed, the bipartisan one, those will somehow filter through the cities. One of the things that we need to make sure that we are working on in partnership with a lot of those cities is not only for them to support minority businesses, but we need to stop playing the game that we play when we talk about minority, where you can just have one female on there and say that that's a minority-owned business. We also need to make sure that we are pushing to make sure that at least 10, 15, 20% of the people that work on that job are locals, because we need to stimulate our local economy. So we can't just get the money and then that minute goes a little too fast for me, Charles.
Real quick, Mr. Dixon, thank you.
Yeah, so I just want to I want to start off by saying I am a person of action, right? So the question was, how do we solve the economic disparity problem in our district? I.e., how do we solve the poverty crisis in our district? And there is only one policy that will actually solve poverty. And it is the same policy that Martin Luther King fought for in 1968, the year before he was assassinated, and that is a universal basic income. Like a lot of other of the candidates have said, we are facing one of the largest job crises in the United States. Right now, 30% of all jobs are automated. In the next 10 to 20 years, 50% of the rest of the jobs will be automated. Right now, over 30% of all stores and malls are closing, which means over 15 million retail workers will lose their jobs. Over 8 million truckers will lose their jobs because of companies like Amazon who are going in, automating all their jobs away, taking up money, hundreds of billions of dollars out of the commerce industry, and then not hiring people. Then they're replacing people with robots. So the only actual policy that can solve our poverty crisis and solve economic disparity is universal basic income.
Thank you. Well, that's a perfect segue, I believe. As the son of a public school teacher, education continues to be the big elephant in the room in our communities. We can allocate the money from federal resources, and it gets to our state in Austin, and something mysterious happens. Right? Excuse me. How will your candidacy undo the logjam of education funding so we can have the kinds of outcomes that we've been fighting for since 1865, at least? Okay? And we'll start with Judge Hill.
Thank you. Education is my wheelhouse. I have 6 degrees, 5 of them earned and 1 honorary. That means that I like education, but I don't like education just for me. I like education for everybody. I didn't start out rich. I started out poor in Mississippi in a tin-top house. And so I know that everybody can get education. Now, how do we get the money? The money is at the federal level at the Department of Education. We access that the same way I access money for transportation, by going there, sitting with the secretary, looking the secretary in the eye and said, I want that money to come to Dallas. I don't want it going to Oklahoma or Omaha. I want it to come to Dallas. When we get the money here, we make sure that we partner with our local elected school board and elected officials to see to it that the money gets where it's needed most in our communities. Thank you.
Dr. Langford, next, followed by Ms. Mason.
All right, thank you so very much. Listen, I, as a career educator, 18 years at the high school in District 30, 13 years at the Mountain View College, District 30. Being a legacy, I don't even know what that was before, but as a first generation graduate out of my home, out of my house, and now I've had 7 family members to graduate from my alma mater. Education is huge. And Nelson Mandela, they say it, everyone says this that knows, it's an empowerment tool that can change anything. And we have to make sure that it is with fidelity, and that just means that we are following and monitoring that money. We have organizations, we have school districts that are in need of money so that they can provide the quality education for our children. And that's why I'm here, because I get to allocate money to Cedar Hill, which is where I live now, and the Dallas area, which is where I grew up. And I know that the schools are struggling. Safety is an issue. Public funding is issue with education. We need to totally overhaul education and come up with a new method that's more effective for our children. Our children are suffering the most because they're not getting those funds.
I understand. Thank you. Ms. Mason. Followed by Mr. Mr. Mulugeta.
As someone who went through the DISD public school system, I can attest to you personally that our schools are severely underfunded. I went to EB Comstock Middle School, which is probably one of the most underfunded schools that I attended in DISD. And I think one of the biggest issues that we have is that a lot of the public funding for our schools are not going to public schools. Some of them are, some legislators are trying to get them to go to private schools and charter schools, but I think we really need to take all the funding and put it towards our public schools. I talked to some teachers and they're telling me that some of our schools, like Spruce, are losing their librarians. If you don't have a librarian, how are you supposed to do research? If you can't do research, how are you supposed to succeed in college? I think that it's very important that we focus our dollars where they need to go, and that's in our underserved communities and in our public school system.
Very good. Mr. Mulugeta. Followed by you, Rep.
All right, so I agree. Education does serve as the greatest equalizer in our community. It does level the playing field for a lot of our students. I attended Urban Park Elementary School in Pleasant Grove for 6 years. I remember opening up a math book and where you write your name in the box, both pages were full. You know, it was okay because it was math, because math doesn't change. However, once it's history or English or science, that's a shame. Our students should be receiving the same resources as other students in other districts. In Texas, you're right. The state does not provide equal funding or provide full funding for public schools, and we do need to make sure that the state is providing its fair share. But on the federal level, we need to find a way to appropriate funds directly to local ISDs and circumvent the state so that the money isn't disappearing. So we need to make sure that we create up grants and programs from the federal level that local ISDs can pull from immediately.
Brett. Thank you.
I feel like Abel is looking at my cheat sheet. No, one of the great policies that Congressman Lloyd Doggett is actually pushing right now that many people don't know about is as it relates to health care. Right now, we can't expand Medicare in the state of Texas because of the Republican legislature. And we know that in rural communities as well as urban communities, they need that money. And so he has a policy that he's been trying to push for that would allow, say, our county elected officials to draw down on the money directly. I think that we should look at something similar to that when it comes to education, because what we're seeing a misuse of funds. And let me talk about why we see the disparities. The formula that we currently have on the state level is actually based upon the tax-based revenue of those that live in that area. And so if you have an area where the tax values are lower, then that means that the schools in those areas will not get the same type of money, say, as someone who's living, say, in Highland Park. And so that is a formula issue that we have on the state level. But what it takes coordination and working with those on the state level, working with those on the school board, as well as working with their city elected officials to make sure that we're all working together in coordination to get something done. It can't just be one person.
Mr. Dixon. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I honestly don't think there's much to add. I don't think there's one Democrat who doesn't think that education reform is important. But I think that we need to take it one step further, right? So not only do we need to collaborate from a national to a local level as far as education is concerned, but we also need to invest in higher education. We need to make sure that, for instance, right now in the United States, only 30% of people graduate with a college degree. And the people who do graduate with a college degree graduate around $30,000 in debt. And the people who do graduate with a college degree most likely cannot find a job in the field that they graduated in. So we have to invest in higher education in the form of technical schools, in the form of community colleges, so kids can actually learn skills that will help them in life. High school is fine, K through 12 is fine. Like everyone on the stage says, yes, we need to invest more. Yes, we need to collaborate more and make sure that the dollars are flowing down. But we need to go one step further and make sure that our kids are prepared for the future. And that starts with investing in technical schools and community college and in higher education in general.
Thank you so much. Ms. Hamilton.
Thank you. And obviously, I agree with much of what has been said. Having been a staffer at the state level for Representative Helen Giddings, and also having served as chief of staff to a member of Congress, there is a delineation. And, with the state, much of the funding that our children get does come from the state, right? But we also have a federal mechanism, and that is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. What I think we need to do is we need to implement a national standard, and we need to have a baseline. And for states, just like when we talk about healthcare that did not accept Medicaid expansion, we should do something in the same format for actual schools and for states who are not providing the resources that are needed to our children, where we actually look at that Elementary and Secondary Education Act and we reform it and we provide more funding from the federal government to fill that gap. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, each of us came in tonight with either a mask or a mask and pre-existing conditions, right? How are we going to change healthcare access for a community that has so many challenges in that arena? We'll start this one with Dr. Langford.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. I appreciate the question, because that is definitely at the forefront of our community, that issue. I'll be honest with you, our community has trust issues, right? We don't understand that the government really cares for us. Why? Because there has not been a relationship established to establish such. And so for that reason, many people are afraid to trust and know what is in their best interest or not. Most of us need to know what those resources are that are available. And again, I can't reiterate it enough. Healthcare is a huge issue, but we need to make sure that we're making it a priority, that it gets to the community that is in most need. A lot of times when people get to them, they're competitive. What we're wanting to say is, mainstream America, District 30, we love you. We want what's best for you. When people know that you care, they trust what you're saying. And so as an educator, I know that if the students knew I cared, I can get them to do what they were needing to do. And that's the same thing with our community. They're tired of people just coming in, saying things, and not fulfilling it. We need someone that is determined to establish the trust and make sure that they have it.
Very good. Ms. Mason. Followed by Mr. Mulugeta. Okay.
Texas 30 has one of the lowest insured, one of the highest uninsured rates in the state of Texas and in the nation. I struggled with this myself growing up with asthma, and my mom not being able to afford my medication, to where my lung collapsed when I was 7 years old, and I spent months in the hospital. This is still happening. Again, I work in communities that face a lot of these challenges, and I try to find them access to healthcare. But the problem is with our current healthcare system, it's a big gap. And as someone mentioned earlier, our governor refuses to expand Medicaid. So the only way to circumvent these issues are to enact a single-payer healthcare system where no one is left out. It has to happen. It has to happen. It is the only way that we can guarantee that people don't have to deal with issues like I deal with, surprise billing, not knowing how much their deductibles are going to be, or just being overcharged for deductibles, being overcharged for their pharmaceutical medications. I think right now in the Build Back Better bill, we have some provisions that allow Medicare to negotiate with the insurance companies, and that's something that will also be able to happen under a single-payer healthcare system.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Mulugeta. Yeah. Okay.
I want to pick up where
Yeah,
Jessica left off.
Okay.
I do think that it's important for us to reform our healthcare. We need to expand access to affordable healthcare, but part of that is allowing our Medicare to negotiate prescriptions with the manufacturers. That's something that is not allowed right now. I believe you mentioned you had asthma. An inhaler in the UK is free. In Canada, it's, I think, $30. In the United States, it's over $300. And that's a problem, because we have created these rules, arbitrary rules, where Medicare and pharmaceutical companies have an advantage over our government. And so we do need to increase access to affordable health care by lowering prescription drug prices. We can do that. We need to ensure that our seniors have access to health care. Seniors, it should be capped. The amount of money they pay for prescriptions on an annual basis right now is $6,000 a year. It should be capped. Lloyd Doggett's bill does bring that down to $2,000 a year. So we need to stop.
Great. Followed by Mr. Dixon after.
You know, what's unfortunate is this idea that in order to have health care in one of the richest countries in this world, for some reason we feel like that should be a privilege instead of a human right. And so I want to start this by saying that we have to look at health care as a human right that should be afforded to everyone. The question is, how do we get there? And I think Abel actually talked about, I should call you Mr. Mulugeta instead. I think he talked about it. The reality is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We see that there are so many other countries that are doing this so much better than we are. There is no reason except there's excuses, and the excuses have to do with the pockets of, say, those that tend to profit, such as Big Pharma. One of the things that we did is we know that diabetes is one of the biggest issues that we have in this country. And at least on the state level, one of my colleagues, Mr. Tallarico, he actually passed a bill so that we could decrease the cost of things such as a life-sustaining medication, such as for those that are diabetic. And so I think that we need to make sure.
Mr. Dixon.
She just gets the waving her little hand up there.
Followed by Ms. Hamilton after.
No one should die because they're poor. I just want to say that. No one in our country, in our district, should die because they're poor. Like I mentioned in my opening statement, my biological father passed away in his 40s from a heart attack because of our inadequate healthcare system. I'm 25, so ideally, I have about 15 more years until I'm his age, and I'm faced with those same threats. My uncle also passed away in his 40s, like they were mentioning earlier, because of the outrageous cost of diabetes medicine and because of our outrageous healthcare system. So it's simple. Like everyone else on the stage has said, we need to fight for free healthcare. But it starts with us. It starts with Texas. We need to force our governor to release the over $100 billion worth of federal funding for Medicaid that he's holding up. It starts with bold progressive actions. And like I said when I first started this, and like everyone on the stage agrees with, no one should die because they're poor. No one. So let's make a change.
Ms. Hamilton.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. This issue is a serious matter, and it's an urgent matter. Right now, we are in a global pandemic, and we are losing people every single day. We are losing our loved ones every single day and our friends. So many people have been taken away from us in the last 2 years of our life. Their lives have been cut short. One of the things that needs to happen is that we need to end the filibuster immediately. We have legislation, Build Back Better, which includes an arm whereby the federal government has created a federal program for states like Texas, where you have governors who care more about scoring political points than saving lives. In Build Back Better, the federal government steps in to cover those in this Medicaid expansion gap.
Thank you. Judge, you.
Thank you, ma'am. Parity in health care is tied to parity in economics. Folks who have money have good health care. Folk who work at minimum wage jobs do not. Folk who have money can afford to stay home and take care of their newborn children, their sick parents, themselves. Folk who have lower paying jobs cannot because they can't afford to be off work. That changes by changing federal regulation and working with state and local officials to see to it that everybody has a living wage and health benefits. It also means bringing down the high cost of medicine. It means forcing Governor Abbott and those like him to expand Medicaid. And it means regulation that says, I'm out of time.
Thank you so much. This next category, I struggle with because it's so broad. We want to talk about justice. I thought about criminal justice, but then there's civil injustice, and there's environmental justice. How are you, and how are you through your candidacy, going to interact, perhaps across the aisle, but just interact with other legislators who clearly don't agree with you on the definition of justice? We'll start with Ms. Mason.
These questions on bipartisanship always stump me a little bit, but I would have to say that there are certain things that you can't compromise on. And when it comes to the lives of young black males, black people, and protecting those lives, I think that that's something you really just cannot compromise on. I think when it comes to like justice with voting rights, that's something that you just cannot compromise on. And sometimes it takes hard power and pressure to get people to see that. As black people, our experiences are we understand our experiences among each other, but everyone else may not understand what it's like to be in that situation. And we can try as hard as we might to try to convince people what it's like to deal with discrimination. I know that we've been fighting with Manchin, trying to get him to pass a voting rights bill and abolish the filibuster, and yet for some reason he won't do it. So sometimes you just have to, sorry about that.
Mr. Mulugeta. Yeah, next row. Okay.
So justice is a broad term, but I'll just stick with criminal justice. And thankfully, a lot of Republicans are, not a lot, there are Republicans who are right on this issue, no pun intended, but they are right on crime. And that's good. You know, we do need a partner to work with in regards to criminal justice, because it is important. So many of our black men are imprisoned, and that does begin to affect the family as a whole. So I've worked on issues at the legislature. We just passed the Richard Miles Act, which requires law enforcement to give up exculpatory evidence to prosecutors, which is extremely important. We have too many young men in prison right now, not because they were guilty of the crime, but because law enforcement decided that they were not going to hand over evidence that would have found them not guilty. So I have no problem working with those who have our community in mind.
Thank you. Followed by Mr. Dixon.
Once again, Abel trying to steal my thunder. So, so I sit on the Criminal Jurisprudence Committee in the House, and so that bill came through there. But more importantly, what most people don't understand is that I actually filed more marijuana bills than anyone else in the Texas House, and I actually got a good majority of them out of committee. I got a majority of them out of committee, out of my Criminal Jurisprudence Committee, because surprisingly enough, lots of the Republicans I actually was able to convince to get on board. In addition to that, what most people don't know is that when it came down to a bill that we call Breonna's bill, when it came down to no-knock warrants, people said there was no way that I was ever going to get anywhere on that bill, but I applied an inside-outside strategy. What I do know how to do is I know how to organize, and so therefore I found something actually in the Republican platform, because I thought surely they got a problem with people just coming into your house, and they did. And it got to the point that the speaker actually made it a priority item for him. It got so big that they decided that a freshman shouldn't carry the bill. So let me tell you, what you have to do is find your meeting place, even if you get to that meeting place for different reasons.
Ms. Hamilton. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Dixon. I'm sorry, and then Ms. Hamilton after.
Yeah, like a few other of the candidates said, you know, when it comes to the lives of hundreds of thousands of black and brown and poor kids in general, there is no compromise. There is no compromise. When it comes to the lives of people like George Floyd, there is no compromise. It's up to us to be willing to take bold progressive actions, to stand up and say, we want criminal justice, to stand up and tell them exactly what we want and not give in and not compromise. The question was if Republicans, you know, how do we get Republicans on board with certain criminal justice reforms if they disagree? There is no right or wrong when it comes to criminal justice. There is simply, excuse me, let me rephrase that. There is no perception of right or wrong. There's no debate when it comes to criminal justice. There is just right or wrong. So, like I said, I don't think there's a compromise to be made. I think we have to stand up for what we believe in. When things like the George Floyd passing happens, it's up to us and our community to not compromise, to take to the streets, to push our legislators and to force them to pass legislation.
Very good.
I love going before you because you always wipe down a mic. Thank you so much. So this is a very broad topic, and I'm just going to bring it back to something that I know about, which is voting rights. All of this comes back to our voting rights, because justice is something that we have to demand. We all know that it's never given to us. And that goes back to our fundamental right to vote. That's why, as a chief of staff in Congress, I was the staffer lead on creating the Voting Rights Caucus, the first ever Congressional Voting Rights Caucus. That was a place where, regardless to the side of the aisle that you're on, you're able to come and work on where you align on legislation as it pertains to voting rights. Because voting rights is what is going to save this democracy. And we cannot take for granted that our democracy is on the line. And so when it comes down to working across the aisle, I do believe that caucuses are things that are instrumental for us to do that.
Very good. Judge Hill. I'm sorry.
So, I would have,
And Dr. Lanford, you're next. Okay.
I want to laser focus on two issues on criminal justice.
At about 1 hour.
And because we have this wonderful public forum that Molly Belt has made available, I'm going to make an appeal. A significant part of my practice, my private law practice, was criminal law. I took only appointed cases because I think that every person deserves the best representation, and poor folk deserve that. My appeal is for other lawyers to do the same. Secondly, I want to talk about working across the aisle. If you want to learn how to work across the aisle, get yourself elected to a city council like Dallas. We had a bunch of Republicans, and I had to work with them to get anything done. It meant slugging it out until we got something.
Thank you, Dr. Langford. Okay.
Well, I would just like to say that oftentimes justice feels like just us. And it is a very unfair situation in most cases, economically, socially, financially, even educationally. And what I'd like to say is that equity is imperative for all people. And we need to know the difference between equality and equity. Justice is a thing that if you are talking to someone about, and as being a facilitator, helping people that have been incarcerated or falsely accused, I've had the opportunity to share with them how they can pick their lives up and go move forward. So a key point of finding, not only fighting in DC to make sure we get the support we need, supportive legislation and policies in place, I will also empower my community so they'll know their rights, they'll know their resources, they'll know exactly how important they are and how to hold the criminal justice system accountable.
Very good. And our last question before we go to our wrap up. This one's kind of broad, so it's real. You can do it as quickly as you like. But it gives you a chance to jump on one hot piece of legislation that's currently. So, the environment and infrastructure. The environment and infrastructure. Okay, and we'll start this round with Mr. Mulugeta. This will let you free on the environment, and infrastructure. Okay.
Environment, infrastructure. Okay, so I do support the infrastructure bill that was passed by Congress. That covers a lot of the issues that we've discussed today, primarily when it comes to economic development and jobs, right? When the government passes an infrastructure bill, it essentially serves as a stimulus. It stimulates the economy because of the top-down. Essentially, there isn't really a trickle, the money does trickle down to all levels of our society. And so it's important for the government to, the Congresswoman was very instrumental in infrastructure. That's one of her, I believe one of her greatest achievements is the amount of work that she provided, the amount of money and appropriations that she provided for infrastructure dollars here in Dallas. So I do believe that we do need to make sure that through the RFP process that we are ensuring that our minority-owned businesses are reaping the benefits of all of the dollars that are coming through under the infrastructure plan.
All right. Rep. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'll left you something.
You ain't leave me much. Once again, able. So yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So the bipartisan bill that came down, one of the great things about it, since I'm going to combine both of the things that you brought up, was the fact that there is money specifically that has been set aside so that we can start to have green public transportation. So there's money so that we can now get electric buses, which will do a lot for our environment. There's also money to make sure that we're putting in more charging stations so that we can encourage more people to get electric vehicles. So we're talking about accomplishing a lot of things at one time. We're talking about jobs, but we're also talking about helping our community. But let's talk about what normally happens when we start talking about justice and the environment, or the lack thereof. I live in West Dallas, and right now, what I was able to do is I was able to secure hearings with TCEQ as well as EPA, so that my constituents in West Dallas could be heard about GAF, which is over in West Dallas, that has been harming people for years. Because a lot of times, if you live in a certain neighborhood where there's not enough money, then you end up being treated a lot differently when it comes to the pollution that is surrounding you and causing health issues.
Mr. Dixon.
It is an undeniable fact that we need investment in our infrastructure and in our environment. Just here in Texas last year, over 200 people died during the winter storm. That is because of our lacking and crumbling infrastructure grid and our power grid right here in Texas. So it starts with investing in our infrastructure. It starts with passing a Green New Deal and investing in President Biden's BBB plan. It starts in actually taking bold progressive actions. This isn't a fantasy. Climate change isn't an illusion or something out of a book. We saw it right here in Texas. Like I just said, over 200 people died because of our failing infrastructure, because of our crumbling power grid. And we need to change that. We need to take action. We need to invest in our environment. We need to pass the Green New Deal. We need to invest in BBB. And we need to help save lives.
Thank you. Ms. Hamilton.
I'm catching on. You know, here in Texas, infrastructure and climate change sort of go hand in hand. As we just saw with regard to this snowmageddon that we all experienced, the infrastructure here was just failing. And so since then, the state and federal government have provided funding for energy companies to address weatherization. And we are all hopeful and encouraged that they will do just that. One of the things that we have to admit to, and it definitely pertains to the other side of the aisle here, our Republican friends, is that climate change is real. We know in Texas, no one expected for us to go through what we went through. And that's not going to be the last time that happens. Climate change is here, and we have to address it. We have to address it for ourselves now, and we have to address it for future generations. And that's why Build Back Better plan must be passed, and we must end the filibuster.
Very good. Judge Hill. Thank you.
Climate change, environment, and infrastructure are topics that elected officials in North Texas have worked on for a very long time. We've worked on it through the Regional Transportation Commission, where I was a member for 8 years. We worked on getting vehicles off the road. We worked on mass transit. We funded electric buses with DART. We set up bike lanes through the city of Dallas. We did other things such as the DART bus in the streetcar in Oak Cliff, which, as I said earlier, I went and got the money for. We did those things to cut down on the pollution. Infrastructure is also something that we worked on at RTC for a very long time, and much of what is in the infrastructure bill passed federally are things that we have worked on at RTC and are very glad to see them now at the federal level.
Ms. Mason. I'm sorry, Ms. Langford. Dr. Langford, and then Ms. Mason.
Okay, no problem. Okay, thank you. I do appreciate the allocation of funds by the Honorable Eddie Bernice Johnson for infrastructure. But one of the things that concern me the most is that we've been told so many dollars are coming to our state and to our district, but there is very little evidence of the results of it. And so I think that too, when we send that money, we have to make sure that those small businesses, minority-owned businesses, people in the community that need jobs are made aware of it so that they can be in tune with it. A huge part of cleaning up our environment. And I know we're talking the Green New Deal. We need to pass that. Build Back Better is phenomenal. But if we are not sending the message to those that are needing it most, it is not very much use to us. And we can tell by the way that Oak Cliff and some parts of West Dallas and some parts of South Dallas and Pleasant Grove, they're missing out on a lot of the monies that are coming. And we have to be sure. Again, fidelity means making sure it does what it was set out to do. And we have to be deliberate about that. Thank you.
And Ms. Mason.
Environmental pollution and infrastructure go hand in hand, of course. In Texas 30, the environmental pollution is really bad, especially in South Dallas. It's so bad that children that grow up in that area are more likely to develop asthma than anywhere else in the state of Texas. Our pipes are also full of lead. Some of the water quality is worse than it is in Flint, Michigan. So I do praise the Biden administration for taking a look at these issues and implementing policies that are going to help eradicate these issues. One of the biggest benefits of this bill, I think, is the fact that it creates green jobs. And these jobs are, again, good green union jobs, jobs of the future. I think that providing training for our high school students and people in college to work on building green infrastructure and being able to make these electric vehicles that we're talking about and be innovative and think towards the future in ways that we can make sure that our climate stays stable and that we don't have to depend on fossil fuels as a main energy source anymore, especially in the state of Texas.
Very good. Thank you so much. So we've reached the part of the program that you all been waiting for, the last question, okay? We're gonna start right where we began, Representative Crockett, for our 2-minute closing statement.
Oh, it's not even a question. Look at this. First of all, I just want to say thank you for having us. You know, there's a lot of options. You've got 9 people on the Democratic primary ticket. And the biggest question is, what's the difference, right? Because for the most part, I think a lot of us, we're a bit of an echo chamber. I think we agree on the very basic principles of the things that need to be done. The differences lie in what can be done, right? So one of the things that I talked about when I ran for the state house was this is a team sport. And the reality is that one person in the U.S. House can't change it all. What matters is that we're on board for the right change. We all want to make sure that people are going to have good paying jobs. We all want that. We want to make sure that there's clean air, and I believe that we all believe that climate change is real. If I'm wrong, somebody correct me. But the point is this, we all believe these things. The difference is the experience. The difference is, what is it that I specifically have done? Well, I've actually legislated. And I think that in this race, the only other person who's ever legislated on any level as far as like this type of legislation, well, that person isn't here today. But I am here, and I'm standing in front of you not only as someone who was named as the best freshman legislator by at least 3 organizations and one of the top lawmakers in general by another organization, as someone who filed more bills than any other freshman lawmaker, as someone who actually was able, as a freshman, to somehow convince somebody across the aisle to carry a bill for me that brought over $50 million right here to Fair Park. I'm somebody who knows how to get the job done even when I'm going in on the other side. Because sometimes you got to work behind the scenes to make sure that you get it done. And that's what I know how to do. And at the end of the day, the Congresswoman specifically called me and said, I'm going to retire, and I think you're the one to succeed me.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon.
I keep messing up. I know he ain't going back.
Just want to start off by saying thank you for holding this forum. Thank you for having us all here. Let's just make this clear. I am not a career politician. I am just a normal kid from Dallas who's simply running to make a real difference and a real impact in people's lives. I am running because I want to help the 22% of our district that lives below the poverty line. I'm running because I want to help the 40% of people who make below a livable wage, the 50% of teachers who work a second or a third job. I'm running because I want to give people a voice again. Because with all due respect, for the last 30 years, those same old establishment policies that some of the other candidates are bragging about are the same policies that have led to 22% of our district living below the poverty line, to 47% of our district suffering with food insecurity, which is higher than the national average, to over 200,000 people in our district not knowing where their next meal is going to come from. I grew up in Dallas struggling, not knowing where my next meal is going to come from. My mom working 2, sometimes 3 jobs just to provide for us. My story is a story of so many people who live in this district who simply want change. They don't want a continuation of the same old, same old. They want new, lively policies, like a universal basic income, the only policy on this stage that actually solves the problem of eliminating poverty. The only policy on the stage that actually solves the problem of reducing suicides, of increasing mental health, of taking the burdens off of families, of allowing kids to perform better in school. For instance, 2/3 of child's performance in school has to do with their home life. So with the universal basic income, we're giving every family $1,000, which means their kids are going to eat better. Parents are going to argue less. We need bold policies. We need new policies, not a continuation of the same old 30 years that's led to people suffering. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Hill. And remind that the camera that you're speaking to is the audience in the world of cyberspace. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you again to our hosts for Monday Night Politics. We appreciate the opportunity. My name is Jane Hope Hamilton. I'm a mom, a wife, and a battle-tested leader. And I say battle-tested leader because at every single turn, I have left no stone unturned. I have managed campaigns of leaders right here in Dallas County. I have fought and beat Republicans at the ballot box. I have worked in Congress as a chief of staff on the U.S. House Rules Committee, on the U.S. House Democratic Caucus. I have worked in the state legislature as well. But for me, this has never been about politics. You see, I am not much of a talker. It's because I am a doer. And the things that have happened to many of us in our lives, whether it is needing employment, or whether it's a loved one needing health care, or whether it is fighting for strong public schools in our district, those are the things that I care about. Those are the things that I have been fighting for. I am prepared to serve as your next member of Congress on day one. And if you elect me, when you elect me, I promise that I will continue to deliver for our communities just as I have for over 20 years. And you may not know my name, but you do know my work. My work has met for our families criminal justice reform right here in Dallas County. My work has met defeating Donald Trump and getting President Biden elected. I am here to serve. I am a public servant, and I am asking for your vote. Thank you.
Judge Hill. Mm-hmm.
I am Von Seal Jones Hill. I am asking for your vote. What sets me apart is my experience. I am a seasoned and experienced lawmaker and policymaker. I have a valid, identifiable record of deliverance. I have passed, in conjunction with others who did not agree with me, laws and regulations and statutes that benefited this community. I have gone to Washington and Austin and brought home the resources that made life better. That's the difference between me and any other candidate. I am seasoned and experienced in delivering, and I want to do that from Washington. You know me as a community servant. You know me as a fair judge. You know me as a firm and upright council member. You know me as a preaching pastor. You know me as a volunteer who went into the schools and read to the children. You know me as a person who was here for the museum from day one and has stayed with it. You know me, you know my record, and I will not change. I will be the same servant leader in Washington that I have been in Dallas for these many years. Molly Belt has sponsored this Monday Night Forum for a long time. I am grateful to her. I am grateful to be here. And to God be the glory.
Amen. And Dr. Langford.
Okay, again, I want to thank everyone, all the people that are even in the forum with us. I have loved being here and hearing your ideas and knowing your passion. Thankful that you did survive